Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. We are now starting our module number 8 on the topic of organization. You may remember, organization is the second of the 4 major managerial functions, and that's why we're looking at it in this module. And as you can tell from this title slide, we're kicking off lecture number 1 with the topic of organizing. And so we are now going to be cracking the top, as they say, on this topic and consider some basic fundamental principles of organization and organizing. We hope that at the end of this video you will be able to discuss the concept of organizing and define an organizational culture. Those are the 2 big learning objectives out of this video, so let's climb in. You may remember from the very first week we asked the question, why do we need to talk about management? And we said that anytime you have an organization of more than 2 people, you're going to need management. And so let's remind ourselves, what is an organization? An organization is a group of individuals working together to achieve goals or objectives that would not be possible. It would be difficult or near impossible for them to achieve individually. And therefore, you combine efforts, you cooperate, you leverage each other's strengths and complementary skills to achieve things that you couldn't do individually. That's why we have organizations. And therefore, organizing is the process of creating the organization. Who organizes? Why impose structure? Well, we hope to answer those questions in this lecture. Why organize? Because you have a group of people. Because you have a group of people who have some common organizational goals. And then the question is, if you all have common goals, how do you achieve them? How do you bring order out of this rather than chaos? How do you all continue on with the same vision so that we know that we're all going in the same direction? How do you do so while still instilling stability so that we all know from day to day what we can actually count on and what we can expect? How do you agree upon methods and processes so we know how we're going to get there together? And how do you establish standards and basic forms of measurement so that you know what's expected of everyone and we know how to measure whether or not we've arrived yet? So these are all the kinds of things that answer the question, why do we want to organize? To bring order out of complexity so that people know where we're going, we know how we're going to get there, we know what we can count on and expect from day to day, and we know how we're measuring our outcomes and our progress. What does this mean? It means that we want to be able to work together. Consider these 2 photos that I've given you on this slide. We can all row together in the same direction, multiplying our efforts so that we are far more effective than if we were simply working independently. That's the top slide. See how orderly that looks? Look at the angle of the oars. They're all just exactly parallel. Just a wonderful job of a team working together. Now compare that to the photo below, which is quite frankly just folks all over the darn map, right? We don't really know whether they'd even know what's going on with the person sitting right next to them in the boat, right? Just a mass of chaos and a mass of white water spurring up. Well, that's the difference. Are we working together, or are we simply happen to be in the same boat together? Are we actually cooperating? Are we coordinating our efforts? Are we getting more out of our combined efforts than we would if we were simply working independently? This is why we need organization. And remember, organization is not about establishing a structure, having an org chart, creating a rule book, creating airtight processes so everyone follows the rules. No, organizing isn't fundamentally about merely imposing structure. Organizing is about providing structure for people. Providing structure for the people to thrive and grow and mature and give their very best to exceed in their performance what they even thought that was possible for themselves. All of those kinds of things. That's why we are trying to provide structure in organizing. It's for the sake of the people, not for the sake of the structure itself. We have to keep that in mind, and that's why we talk about immediately, right here in this first slide, organizational culture in this first lecture. What is organizational culture? It is the people in the organization. Organizational culture, as you can see on the first bullet point, consists of the shared values, beliefs, norms, rules, behaviors, and philosophies in an organization. It is what happens when people are together in an organization. It's a culture. Formal expressions of organizational culture might include the company vision and the mission statement, or the established formal code of ethics, as well as regular ceremonies, meetings, and those kinds of things. And there are informal expressions of organizational culture as well, right? There are the agreed upon dress codes. What does business casual mean in your organization, right? As well as what are common extracurricular activities, what are the stories, the legends you share together. Every organization has a culture, whether or not managers deliberately choose to influence it or not. You can't help but have a culture if you have an organization. The only question is, are you using organizational culture as a competitive advantage, or is it just simply forming itself and you're living with the consequences? Well, just from the way I put that last sentence, I think you know what I'm suggesting as managers, what our role is. Our role is to actively influence the corporate culture for good. Why is culture important? Because culture ultimately is what defines and shapes the relationships between the people in the organization. How does it do that? Well, it defines and shapes what is expected as normal behavior, how we talk with one another, how we behave, how polite we are, how formal or casual we are, what kinds of jokes and humor is acceptable, and what kind of jokes and humor is not. How do we treat customers? How do we talk about customers behind closed doors? How do we talk about each other behind closed doors? All of these kinds of things, right? It's a part of culture, and culture is what shapes the relationships between the people in the organization. And therefore, if that's true, then you can readily understand why I've put the fourth bullet point. Culture defines and shapes the entire organization. Culture is what makes our companies what they are and what they're not. That's how important it is. Consider a real-life example. A company based just across the bay from us, right? Just over the Golden Gate Bridge, Salesforce.com. Now the owner of the tallest building in the city of San Francisco, right? Well, for all accounts, I'm told that Salesforce has a very, very healthy corporate culture. And they have that deliberately because from the very top, from the founder, from Mark Benioff, all the way down, they care a great deal about deliberately influencing and shaping the corporate culture of their organization. Now, one of the tools that they use there is what they call V2MOM. V2MOM is, of course, an acronym, and it's an acronym for, as you see there on the slide, those 5 points: vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. And it's a way, it's a method, it's a tool to create a living, organic conversation about what you want to achieve, what's important to you, how are you going to achieve it, what stands in your way, and how do you measure what you are accomplishing. It's a way for us to talk about these things between each other, with our bosses, with our subordinates. It's a way to have the conversation about what we call in business as alignment. What's alignment? Well, it seems like a big fancy word, but do we really know what it means? Here's very simply, are we rowing together or are we rowing against each other? Do we have the same goals? Is our vision for what we want to achieve the same as the rest of the organization? Are we rowing in the same direction? Why do we want to achieve that? Is what's important to you the same thing as what's important to others in this organization? Are we rowing in the same direction together? What methods are we going to use to accomplish what you want to achieve? Are those methods things that we already do as a company? Are we rowing together in the same direction? You sort of get the point, right? And I will give you another external assignment about V2MOM for you to try this out as a method of articulating your thoughts and your desires and what you want to accomplish in your own life, and see if we can actually use that as a vehicle to spark a valuable conversation, perhaps. More on that in an external assignment. For now, I want you to do a little reading and do some research about Salesforce's V2MOM tool to get familiar with it. It's a tool. It's a tool for you to begin to discuss the concept of organizing and organizations, and hopefully to be able to consider well and define what is an organizational culture and why is it important. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you as we kick off Module 8. I hope we're going to have a good time, and remember always that as we talk about these kinds of things, when we talk about in the topic of organization, it's not simply in order to establish a structure and a framework and rules and a rule book, but it's really to be able to get the very best from the people in our organization, and so that they feel that they're giving their best and really living their very best version of themselves at work. Hope that's helpful as we kick off Module 8. We'll see you in the next lecture.